The cops know what they're doing and who they're up against. Everyone agrees with that. Police officers are taught to be calm and professional in dangerous situations like crimes. It is their job to stop crimes, find proof, put criminals in jail, and give victims' families justice and closure. Then what happens when the police force you trust, makes one bad choice that turns everything upside down? It took too long for the police to solve the case of 19-year-old beauty queen Nona Dirksmeyer, who was found dead in her own home. They were careless and incompetent, wasting a lot of time looking for someone they were sure was the killer, while missing the clear signs that were there the whole time. Paul and Carol Dirksmeyer had a daughter named Nona Carol on December 26, 1985, in Zachary, Louisiana. Following that, the Dirksmeyer family moved to Russellville, Arkansas, and made it their home there. Her dad was in the Army, and her mom worked as a nurse. She had 4 boys and 1 sister, and they were all very close. After that, Nona went to Dover High School and finished in 2004. But on August 20th, 1996, when Nona was only 10, tragedy and sadness came into the lives of her family. Today was the day that Nona's dad, Paul, died. It was a very sad time for her family. However, Nona was in high school soon after he died, and she told her mom a very scary secret she had been keeping to herself for years. You see, Nona was able to leave when her father died. Why? Because it turned out that the person Nona thought would guard her was actually a monster. The sad truth is that Nona's father abused her in every way. Without a doubt, hearing about something like that, I find it disgusting. Thank goodness Nona was able to break free from this loop when she was very young. That doesn't lessen the many, though. Not only did Nona have to deal with the trauma's memories and guilt, she also had to show that she could grow up without a steady father. She finally told her mom, and luckily, Carol believed her. But Carol couldn't do anything because the abuser, her husband, had died and couldn't face the consequences of his actions, at least not in this life. Nona also has terrible mental scars from this terrible event. She was a wonderful girl, but she had been depressed since she was very young. Nona was quiet and nice. She didn't have many friends, and people who met her didn't know everything about her. But the people who knew Nona really cared about her. Kevin Jones, her best friend since kindergarten, was one of them. Kevin was the kind of best friend that everyone wants. He was kind and loving, and he looked out for Nona too. They grew up together because they lived close to each other and couldn't be separated. They always planned events and did things together because they liked being with each other. One of the few people who knew about Nona's abuse was Kevin. He didn't leave her to deal with it on her own, though. He stayed with her through it all. Kevin had a lot of patience and thought Nona would get through it, even though she was tough at times. He was there for her when she was depressed, and their friendship grew stronger over time. In fact, they became so close that they started dating, which was wonderful. Anyone who saw Nona and Kevin together knew they were meant to be together. Other people who knew Nona told her to come out of her shell too. There's nothing wrong with being private, but Nona's friends knew she was meant to do great things and just needed a little push. Finally, this little push got Nona to compete in beauty pageants. Several neighborhood beauty contests she competed in and won many prizes. Her first competition was for Miss Petite Jean Valley in 2005. That same year, she also went to the Miss Arkansas pageant. Nona also used her mental pain to do good things. She did a lot of volunteer work for women who had been abused or violently assaulted. That being said, She was very religious. She sang in the choir at her church and was a member of the First Christian Church and the Big Brothers and Big Sisters organization. In terms of college, both Nona and Kevin went to Arkansas Tech University. Nona chose to major in music education because she wanted to use her musical skills as a possible job path. Nona's time to fly was now college, so she chose to rent an apartment close to school. Okay, so Nona's mum, Carol, got married again after Paul died, and Nona's stepdad was much better than her biological father, but he was still strict, and everyone in the house had to follow his rules, like getting home early and having a curfew, etc. Nona didn't want to do that because she was in college and wanted to be on her own, which was a good reason. This is why she moved into her Russellville, Arkansas apartment. But not long after that, Kevin told Nona some shocking news. Kevin had chosen to switch schools, which meant he would be moving an hour and a half away from Nona. The two people had been together for 5 years, but this was their first time trying to be together long distance. Because Kevin and Nona loved each other so much, even though they lived far apart, they made it work. They talked to each other often, told each other what was going on, and met up whenever they had time. Soon, it was December 2005, and the air was filled with happy holiday energy. The sad thing is that something very scary happened to Nona at this very moment, in the very place she called home. Kevin and Nona were going to meet on December 15th, 2005. They were excited to spend time together now that the holidays were over. In the morning of the same day, around 9 a.m., Nona texted Kevin to wish him a good day, and that was the saddest thing Kevin ever heard from Nona. Kevin kept waiting for Nona to call, but he never did. As he became more worried, he kept calling and texting Nona. At one point, Kevin texted Nona, "Are you still alive?" out of panic. Kevin called his delivery friend Ryan right away when he was done with his chores and asked if he could go check on Nona. Ryan was shocked to see Nona's car parked outside her apartment building when he got there. The lights in the house were still on from the outside, but no one answered the doorbell when he rang it. Kevin felt really bad about this, so he asked his mum to go with him to Nona's place. Sometimes Kevin has the key to her place, but he forgot to bring it with him that time. They had no choice but to use the back folding doors to get in. To give you some background, the folding doors were usually locked from the inside. Some sources say it was some kind of protection fence. Nona asked for this because she was afraid for her safety when she was home alone. Kevin thought the security bars would be on the back folding doors, but there were none when the three of them got there. Kevin was scared right away because Nona would never have taken down the fence, especially if she was home by herself. So why was it taken down? Kevin saw something red on the blinds as soon as he walked into the flat. It's likely not a surprise what it was. He went up to Nona's bedroom, though, and saw a terrible scene. A dead and cold 19-year-old woman named Nona was lying on the floor. It was a horrible scene. On a whim, Kevin, who was very upset, grabbed Nona, who had already died, and started crying violently. It had been 5 years since they broke up, and now she was lying there, dead and out in the open for who knows how long. Janice, Kevin's mum, called the cops right away. The house was taped off as soon as investigators and emergency services got there. At first look, the police could tell that the attack on Nona was very bad. Nona was hurt very badly with a table lamp and a knife. A used birth control package wrapper was on the floor, and there was one fingerprint on the lamp. Based on the analysis, Nona could have died at any time between 10:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. But this is where the detectives really went wrong. They didn't look closely at the crime scene, look at the blinds for clues, or look for shoe prints in the flat. In addition, they only looked in the bedroom where Nona was found and never went anywhere else. But why? That's because they were already looking at one person: Kevin. When the police came into the room and saw Kevin, they knew they had the right person. First, they saw that Kevin's clothes were stained with Nona's blood. This was because, as you may remember, he cried and hugged her when he found her, and the police decided that he did it on purpose to hide any clues about the crime that might be on his clothes. For them, this was the only answer that made sense. But this was only the beginning. The cops also thought it was odd that Kevin went to Nona's apartment with his mom and a friend. The cops say that Kevin planned ahead and brought people with him so that they could testify against him. Don't forget the text message Kevin sent to Nona asking if she was still living. That's right. The police held on to this information like their jobs depended on it and said Kevin killed Nona. You're not the only one who thinks this is completely crazy. There's more though. Kevin, who was 19 years old, was taken to the police station and questioned for a long time. He was even forced to admit to the crime. Kevin was in the room by himself during the questioning. When he realized he was a suspect in the death of his girlfriend, he punched the chair out of fear and anger, and the video caught it. So, when the police saw this, they immediately thought Kevin was a secret abuser. This behavior made him more likely to attack Nona and kill her. Remember that Kevin didn't have a lawyer and was being pushed to admit. Kevin had to take a polygraph test at one point, and guess what? He failed. But here's the catch. The person who looked at the test data wasn't even a specialist. Since he was a new police officer, these results didn't help him at all. If that didn't make you want to pull out your hair, this next part will. The police had no proof that Kevin was guilty. The crime scene showed that Nona had fought for her life, which means that the person who attacked her probably had cuts, bruises, and other injuries on their body as well. Kevin didn't have any though. At one point, the police even thought Kevin was Nona's jealous and angry boyfriend who wanted to get back at her. Now, this part might not make sense to you. Again though, you're not the only one who feels this way. What happened was that the police talked to Nona's friends and found out that she had been seeing someone else while Kevin wasn't around. Police checked the man's story and found it to be strong, so they didn't think he was guilty. But the police continued to think that this was a reason for Kevin. The cops say that Kevin confronted Nona and killed her with a baseball bat when he found out that she was cheating on him with someone else. With this knowledge, the police pretty much had no choice but to ask Kevin to confess. How did they do that though? Anyway, the police told Kevin that everyone in his family and Nona's family thought he did it. It was clear that the agents were trying to throw the blame for the crime on Kevin just to get Nona's case over with. Being held at the station for so long by the police made Kevin very unhappy, and he even missed Nona's funeral, which he had helped to plan. This went on for months, and if you thought it was crazy, it's not even close to over yet. Kevin was caught and charged with murder in March 2006, which was almost 3 months after Nona's death. Their only proof? Kevin's fingerprint was found on the light bulb in the lamp. Detectives thought that this one fingerprint on the murder weapon was enough to prove that he did it. Truth be told, Kevin did touch the lamp while he had Nona in his arms, which could explain the print on the light bulb. But was that enough for the police to find him guilty of murder? That would be found out soon enough. Everyone knew about the investigation, and they were afraid that the jurors would make the wrong decision based on rumors. That's why the trial took place somewhere else. It was said by the defense that Kevin killed Nona because his phone was off from 10:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., and his fingerprint was was found on the murder weapon, but only one fingerprint. On the other hand, the defense brought in people who supported Kevin's alibi. They saw Kevin at a gas station and gave him money to buy food. His grandma was one of them. Someone else saw Kevin eat lunch between 12:30 and 1 p.m. This was also proven by CCTV film. That means Kevin couldn't have done the crime in that short of a time. At that moment, he wasn't near Nona's house. The defense also brought up the mistakes that were made in the probe. The defense says that the cops did look at the unknown fingerprints, but the database did not show any matches. Those could have been the fingerprints of the real criminal. Also, the police didn't find any DNA on the birth control package at first, but when the lawyers asked for a second test, they found bits of unknown male DNA that didn't belong to Kevin. An autopsy tech also told an interesting fact about Nona's body position. He said that the body was on its back at first, but after a while it was turned over so that it was facing downwards. This made it look like someone used Nona after she had died. It may seem impossible, but Kevin's hearing went on for more than a year. After deliberating, the jury came to the conclusion that Kevin was not guilty because there was not enough proof to prove his guilt. Kevin was relieved, but what really hurt him was that a lot of people, including the cops, still thought he was guilty. Think about how Kevin must have felt. Not only did he find his 5-year girlfriend dead, but the cops were making him look like the killer, and some people believed them. The cops made a lot of mistakes and weren't very professional or skilled. They were so close to convicting someone who wasn't guilty of killing Nona. When Kevin was no longer a suspect, the agents went back to their desks. This time, lawyers were there to tell them what to do. The DNA on the birth control box was compared to the DNA of all the guys who knew and talked to Nona, but the results were not clear. That is, until September 2007, when the case finally got better. A man named Gary Dunn was caught stealing. What did that have to do with the attack by Nona? The DNA that was found at Nona's crime scene was the same as Gary's. On top of that, Gary lived in the same apartment building as Nona, and at first, Nona even thought Gary might be involved in her research, but because the police were looking in the wrong way, he was ruled out. Even worse, Gary was also charged with and found guilty of assaulting another woman. It was also never checked that he had a good excuse for the attack on Nona. Gary says that he was just shopping with his mom. Remember this, because it will be important again. During this case, the detectives keep making big mistakes. It was time for them to make things right. The cops finally got it, and Gary was brought in to be questioned. He did pass a polygraph test, though. One more thing, though. This test was once again given by someone who wasn't authorized to read polygraph results. This is not true. Of course, when the police finally checked Gary's story, they found that it was not true. Gary did go shopping with his mom, but that was 2 days before Nona attacked. Gary did show the shopping receipts to the police when he was first questioned as a suspect in 2005, but the detectives either didn't notice the dates were off or didn't care. This case could have been solved years ago if the police had paid a little more attention to Gary's alibi and not pushed and questioned Kevin so much that he admitted to the crime. What made things even stranger was that the unknown fingerprints on the lamp looked like Gary's, but there was something wrong. It wasn't a perfect match. Since the murder happened so long ago, the evidence had been lost, and the fingerprints and DNA hadn't been retrieved within the first few hours of the crime being reported. This meant that even though the police were mostly to blame, the DNA evidence and fingerprints, which were clearly Gary's and no one else's, couldn't be used as proof in court, which was terrible for the investigation. Now that we know all of this new information, Gary was caught and charged with killing Nona. He was on parole for almost killing a woman in 2002. Gary was a very mean person. He was known for being rough with women in the past. He hurt a woman who was out for a run in 2002. It was so bad that he told her he would kill her if she fought back. The woman was lucky to get away. She ran to her car and called the cops. Soon after, Gary was caught and sentenced to 19 months in jail. At Gary's murder trial, which began in April 2010, his wife spoke out against him. She said that he was a scary and angry man and that she was just someone he could hit. The husband of Gary also told a very scary but damning story. See, she caught him watching Nona through her window a few weeks before her sad death. The prosecutor was shocked by this because it smelled like it was planned ahead of time. Gary didn't just attack Nona for no reason, even though we don't know why. Gary had picked Nona on purpose to be his next target of abuse and violence, and she died because of that choice. In other words, this is what the prosecutor said happened on December 15th. Gary knocked on Nona's door because they lived in the same building. For some reason, Nona let him in. He was either acting like he needed help, or there was another reason. And no matter what, he quickly beat Nona up in her bedroom, where he did many horrible things, including using the lamp to kill her. The most bizarre thing about this whole situation is that Gary's defense team kept blaming Kevin and sticking to the story that Kevin caught Gary's woman cheating on him. The trial was called a mistrial because Gary's fingerprints and DNA could not be used as proof. The judges also couldn't decide what to do. There was only one meaning here. A new trial was set up, and this time, the woman Gary struck in 2002 was one of the witnesses. Although this did not help, the judges still could not decide, and they had to try again. It is totally upsetting to learn that the investigators had the proof but couldn't use it because it had been damaged. I can't think of anything worse that would feel like for Nona's family. Gary Dunn, who clearly attacked Nona and then killed her, was let go without being charged. It's all because the detectives didn't do their job at the start of the case. Gary, who was 39 at the time, was caught again soon after for 2 more crimes in one day in 2018. The first one was an attempt to take a woman, which luckily failed, and the second one was acting badly in public in front of another woman. The police were called right away, and because Gary had a history of violence, he was eventually found guilty and given a 15-year prison term. This case was really sad. The person who killed Nona not only got away with it once, but several times. Gary is in jail, but he's not there because he killed Nona. Even though the cops know exactly who did it, Nona's case is still officially open and closed. Nona was only 19 years old, but she had a lot of goals for the future. She planned to become a music teacher and had a whole life ahead of her. After all the bad things that happened and the pain she was in, Nona didn't deserve to have her life ended so violently and for no reason. Families and friends of the kind and beautiful young woman miss her every day. We can only hope that detectives find enough proof to finally find Gary guilty of killing Nona so that the Dirksmeyer family can move on with their lives. On that terrible day, Kevin lost not only his girlfriend, but also his whole future. It was even worse when he found out that his girlfriend of 5 years had been cheating on him behind his back. Kevin chose to go in a different direction after this big event, so he studied law. In the end, he became a lawyer. In 2011, Kevin also sued 2 police officers who wrongly accused him. But the case didn't go anywhere. Nothing is known about why Nona died in the end. Kevin also lost the life he thought he had. But for what? It's too bad that answer will probably never be found to that question. Kevin has spent his whole life learning and practicing law. He has promised that such a huge injustice will never happen again. This is bad news for Nona, her family, and everyone close to her. The damage has already been done. That's it for this case. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime content. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so let's talk in the comments. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.